My name's Bill, and I'd like to welcome you to my tiny little creative space. Today, I want to talk to you about the life and death of Booger Monkey. This is a true story. No names have been changed, and there's no one who's innocent. In my early 20s, when I was married to the first of a long line of wives, I found a stray cat wandering around the neighborhood. He was a young cat. You might say an adolescent kitten or whatever. You get the idea. He had almost no tail. Either he was born deformed or it had been cut off somehow in his infancy. That was his only flaw. Well, that and the boogers. I don't know what his problem was, but he had boogers all the time. It wasn't really snot per se. It was just dry, clumpy little boogers that would gather around the edge of his nose. That's where the name came from, Booger Monkey, because he had boogers. And he looked like a monkey. I'm not joking. The cat looked like a motherfucking monkey. He was some sort of Siamese mix with a really round black face, and if you could ignore the fact that he had pointy ears and the body of a cat, then he could very easily be mistaken for a primate. Booger Monkey quickly became a part of our little family. We loved him. He was always happy to be around us. He was playful and affectionate and obedient, or at least as obedient as cats are capable of being, and he was a beautiful animal, in body and in spirit. Beautiful in a tailless, boogery, monkey-looking kind of way. Long story short, Booger Monkey got sick. We hadn't had him too long, less than a year. A few months, maybe. He got sick, and we spent a pile of money on a vet, only to learn that he wouldn't be getting any better. His condition was fatal. He actually did get better for a while, but then he got sick again, and then we came home from a Mexican restaurant one night and found Booger Monkey in the closet, stiff as deer horns and dead as freedom. His eyes were closed and his mouth was wide open, and it looked like he'd died screaming. It was horrific looking, really. Anyway, my poor wife puked her fajitas all over the floor. So now the two of us, still very much in grief and shock, had two very unpleasant things to do that really couldn't wait to be done. After a brief chat, we struck a bargain. I agreed to bury Booger Monkey, and my wife agreed to mop up her vomit. Neither job was desirable. She'd puked a lot, and we'd literally just gorged ourselves on Mexican food. The vomit was both voluminous and malodorous, and Booger Monkey was in full-on rigor mortis, rigid as though he was made of wood, and it was freezing cold outside with a solid layer of snow and ice on the ground. Not exactly grave-digging weather, especially for a dude who didn't own a shovel. My first thought was to put him in a box, but all we had was a small shoebox, and his legs wouldn't bend, so the box was a bad idea. Scratch the box. But then I had to put him in something. I couldn't just walk out of the house with him tucked under my arm like I just picked him up at the taxidermist. That would certainly result in more drama or projectile vomiting. So then I thought, I'll put him in a garbage bag. But alas, I couldn't do that either, because that would be like saying that Booger Monkey was garbage. I'm a poet. I put a lot of stock in symbolism, so that simply wouldn't do. Finally, I found an old pillowcase and I put him in that. I walked out carrying what looked like a heavy cloth bag of broken coat hangers. Not a good thing to carry when you're trying to look all nonchalant and don't want people watching you because they can't help but wonder what the fuck it is you're doing. But I had no choice, so I left with all the subtlety and inconspicuousness of a St. Patrick's Day parade. I took him outside, and I found a ravine behind a small open field, and I buried him under some rocks in an out-of-the-way place. Because it was February, and to hell with all that digging. Then, as usual, in the wake of death, one thinks. One remembers. I won't bore you with all the cuddly moments and the laughter shared over Booger Monkey's antics. All pet owners have memories like those of their pets, so my connection to Booger Monkey wasn't really anything special or unusual in that regard. But they were important memories to me, and I lived in those memories in the ensuing days. And I still carry them with me even now. Otherwise, you wouldn't be hearing the story. I was young at the time, but I was no stranger to death even then. I'd lost all of my grandparents, a few pets, and my best friend Tim had been killed in a fistfight my senior year in high school. That's another story entirely, but suffice it to say, Tim's death was extremely traumatic for me. Much more so than the death of my grandparents or Booger Monkey. It was so painful, in fact, that I really wasn't able to objectively analyze it. I was traumatized by it, and it affected me in a lot of ways, but I never really thought too deeply about it. I focused mostly on my grief. It didn't occur to me in the midst of all that to reflect on death and to try and derive something in the way of meaning or understanding from it. I was way too close to the situation emotionally, and my grandparents, well, I loved them, and it was sad to see them die, of course, but they were old, and they kind of had it coming. I was young, and it didn't seem like something to spend a lot of time thinking about. But then came the untimely death of my beloved Booger Monkey. It was the first time in my life that I'd really thought at any length about death and what it means to me in my life. I was sad at Booger Monkey's loss, but he was just a pet after all, and he'd been sick for a while, so it wasn't unexpected. I wasn't so incapacitated by the loss that I couldn't rationally sort it out in my head. The grief wasn't so deep that I couldn't hold it out in front of me and turn it over and think about it. I realized that the ache I felt inside was because I wouldn't have Booger Monkey in my life anymore. I loved that goddamn cat. But then I realized that my sense of loss also represented some kind of connection, even if only an emotional one, and that if someone or something that dies has a connection with someone or something that lives after it, then that thing really hasn't died. I mean, not in the fullest sense of the word. I mean, sure, Booger Monkey won't be chasing twist ties around the kitchen anymore, but I remember him, and I think about him, and those thoughts affect me in many small ways. To this day, almost 30 years later, Booger Monkey looks back at me through the eyes of every cat. And I hear Tim's laughter every time I'm clowning around with friends, and I see my grandparents too. I see them in my mom's eyes, and I see them in my children's eyes, and I see them in the mirror. Soon I will be old. I'll have it coming. But don't write me off, not just yet, because even after I die, I will still be very much in the game, as will we all. It's a fact that we change everything that we touch, and I'm inclined to believe that we touch everything simply by being alive. Now, I will admit that that's starting to sound like a bunch of neo-theological New Age bullshit, so let's just assume, for the sake of argument, that it isn't true. Let's say that we only change the lives within the reach of our fingertips. Even then, we're still immortal. For example, my children will think with my mind long after I'm dead. They may not agree with me or make the same choices I would have made, but they'll probably know what I would have thought. And love me or hate me, they'll raise their children drawing from whatever things they saw that I did right and wrong as a parent in the forefront of their minds. Even the negative can bring about good if we allow it. There are some, however, who don't have family or even close friends. But even those who don't have intimacy with anyone can touch others with a well-placed act of kindness or generosity. A mere smile shared with a stranger in an elevator might derail an incipient depression that could have ended in a suicide. An act of kindness could alter the fate of a nation under the right circumstances. It's impossible to know our true reach. Yet, however we manage to touch other lives, and whatever lives we manage to touch, they then touch other lives while carrying the effects of our touch. Now, whether they mimic what you do or use it as a mental bookmark as something to avoid repeating, you've participated in their growth. You don't have to think about that very long before you begin to realize that even without theology, even without faith, that all life is inextricably connected in this way. Experientially, emotionally, intellectually, linguistically, culturally. It's impossible to know or even speculate the countless ways that we continue to live in the world that we leave behind when we die. Like the long-dead Booger Monkey, who reaches out to you right now through my words. Booger Monkey, whether you like it or not, has just affected your life. So, be kind. Choose wisely. Booger Monkey is dead. Long live Booger Monkey.